vai bem até atingir 400.
This will allow them to go a little bit further, stay a little bit of time also in the sea, which will improve their capture. At the moment we have 50 business plans, that 90% of them are women-led, and now we are supporting them how to connect with the investments, opportunities and fundings that are available.
Recolhe nome para formação para pescadores sobre conserva de pescado a bordo, para ficar prático, com experiência para fazer qualquer coisa de bem-estar. E também para pescadores na formação de guia turista.
People like Maria are very important for the program because she was already empowered, but she showed with the training and all the support that we have given, she has embraced more challenges. So now she's thinking bigger and she can be the example for others.
Podemos para o quinta vai formação, quinta vai reunião, quinta fazer tudo por tudo, também tá para a comunidade também para ter uma mulher ativa, assim mamina onde quem vai, para ficar missão de comunidade, que nós é chefe de família para não arranjar uma coisa de buscar pão para nosso filho.
Meetings between civilizations have actually happened in the past, but they have happened at a very slow rate, at a rate at which it was possible to assimilate. Well, it took many travelers, it took many years. But today, everything happens more quickly. In fact, it is amazing to see how quickly you have been embraced by the whole of the American civilization and the whole world.
As I say, mostly, it has also another side of it, especially for the very young people, they find it all of a sudden something very exciting and very interesting.
We are different people and different civilizations, right, so that we can express different approaches to life. Yes. And the excitement is precisely because we are different. If we were the same, it wouldn't be at all interesting.
L'océan produit la moitié de l'oxygène que nous respirons. Il nourrit 3 milliards de personnes et fait vivre 600 millions d'autres.
Entonces es una conversación de amigos. ¿Sí antes?
Ce combat est vital pour nous tous. Et je le dis ici avec force, les abysses ne sont pas à vendre. Et pas plus que le Groenland n'est à prendre, pas plus que l'Antarctique ou la haute mer ne sont à vendre, pas plus que les licences de pêche des pays en développement ne sont à donner. pas plus que les données scientifiques ou la sécurité des populations littorales ne sont à sacrifier. Nous parlons d'un bien commun.
Esta cumbre debe ser recordada como el momento en que el mundo entendió que cuidar, proteger el océano no es una opción, es una obligación moral, es racionalidad económica y la protección misma de la existencia de nuestra especie en esta tierra.
We live in an age of turmoil, but the resolve I see here gives me hope. Hope that we can turn the tide, that we can move from plunder to protection, from exclusion to equity, from short-term exploitation to long-term stewardship.
There's not one of us who isn't affected by new changes in data, artificial intelligence, digital transformation, innovations, foresight, and behavioral science. They are shaping all of our lives, and that is why the UN 2.0 Week matters to all of us. UN 2.0 is a series of the most important facets of our people. You and I, all part of the United Nations and part of the multilateral system. It's around how to harness innovation and digital transformation to all together transform the United Nations into a body that serves better than we ever have before. There is a rich series of panels and discussions, and you can register at the link below and join any one of those sessions. The entire UN 2.0 agenda matters more today than it ever has.
When glaciers melt at an accelerated rate due to climate change, it disrupts the entire natural water cycle. This not only impacts the water availability, but also intensifies the risk such as floods, landslides, and these disruptions pose significant threat to ecosystems, economies, the livelihood of countless people around the world. We have about 275,000 glaciers worldwide and holding up to 70% of the global freshwater. So that's massive. Since 1975, we have seen that 9,000 gigatons of freshwater has been lost. So to put this into perspective, this is the size of Germany and the height of 25 meters. In Switzerland, for example, in the last 2 years, in 2022 and 2023 alone, 10% of the Swiss glaciers melted away. Melting glaciers also directly impact the sea level rise. It's the second largest contributor to the rising levels of sea, and with every millimeter of sea level that's rising, somewhere between 200 and 300,000 people are exposed to annual flooding. It's a global problem and hence need a global solution because these problems are of shared natural resources. This dedicated high-level conference on glaciers that is happening in Dushanbe, it will serve as a platform to create awareness about the alarming consequences of glacier loss that we are seeing at the moment. But at the same time, we also hope that this will generate massive political momentum. At the end of the conference, there will also be an adoption of a final comprehensive declaration, and the declaration will outline actionable commitments, partnerships, initiatives to implement. This document will be formally presented in the UN General Assembly later this year. So this is going to be one of the major outcomes of this conference. We need to act now, and the only way to preserve our glaciers is to stabilize the climate and to reduce global warming.
This is Alpha Golf 249, radio check, over. I have conducted trainings to all the military personnel in UNISFA on incorporating gender into peacekeeping operations. I also have interactions with the community, women and children and even men of the community, where we had a team of medical personnel join us to conduct education on the effect of harmful cultural practices such as female genital mutilation and early marriage. I also work with the community through the OMPO Gender Cell and the OMPO Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Advisor.
We will be planting 2 persimmon trees that were born out of the seeds that survived atomic bombings in Hiroshima. Apparently, persimmon trees have a lifespan of between 50 and 75 years. So I hope that it will grow to become those big trees that will survive 75 years or even 80 years. And then many people will be able to enjoy the fruit of this tree, which is now a symbol of peace and, of course, resilience.
I hope as these saplings grow, so too will our aspirations for peace spread and become a reality. I sincerely hope Hibakuju Moku planted here will stand as a symbol of this spirit.
It is very difficult to really imagine and understand what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki 80 years ago. But I think what we all need to remember is that we can make peace and build peace if we are together. And as you can imagine, the United Nations is a place where people and countries come together and then work together to make that objectives a reality.
From Chugoku to the Ota, nothing remained. Upon the debris-strewn red earth. In the silence that came with time, shoots with elliptic leaves to 5 bright petals. A vivid signal that survival is the future, that through resilience we find a peace and learn that for no other reason it should ever happen again.
In 1945, when the UN was created, humanity had gone through 2 catastrophic wars. The First World War, in which 30 million people or so had died, and a Second World War, in which another 60 million people had perished. So the demand by the states to have some sort of security in the future to prevent the outbreak of a Third World War was so insistent that when President Roosevelt of the United States proposed creating this body called the UN, there was an immense attention given to the idea and great enthusiasm among the states that had won the Second World War to come together and actually put together this unusual organization that would stamp out the possibility of conflicts in the future. And that's what brought them together in San Francisco in 1945, and they drafted the UN Charter.
And it is now my duty, my honor and my privilege in the chair to call for a vote on the approval of the Charter of the United Nations.
The UN Charter was the sum and substance of humanity crying out for some sort of world order. They created a charter which reflected the aspirations of humanity for peace, for negotiating settlements, for handling food shortages and dealing with health issues and transportation and all the features that go into living a life on the planet. And that was the notion behind the UN. And frankly, the spirit was very enthusiastic at that time. Of course, we now know today that the UN has survived for 80 years through many different crises, and ones that sometimes it helped settle and sometimes was not able to help settle. Nonetheless, the aspiration to have this organization around is so deep in the human spirit that I just think that had the UN dissolved yesterday, it would be reinvented today. It's just so necessary, and we still look up to it as the place to get peace in this world. The world of today is better off, frankly, than it was in 1945. I think it's so important to remember what the UN is all about, why the UN Charter, which was established 80 years ago, is so significant for our lives. It has helped give the ground rules about how people should live their lives, how states should work with each other, how disputes can be settled. So it's almost a kind of guideline for how lives should be lived and how the earth should be governed. The UN represents symbolically the idea of collective security, the idea that we are all together in the plight of humankind, and that we cannot act separately. We have to be unified. Remember, the Charter, the UN Charter, is something we should all treasure for future generations.
No one is born hating. We are all born as human beings, free from prejudice. And as we grow up, we learn things, we acquire things, we pick up things from our environment, we read things.
Words sometimes prompt people to later take violent action. And so it's important to shut down hateful speech so that it doesn't then encourage people to move toward actions that are even more dangerous and deadly.
I think that hate is so pervasive. It keeps people from finishing school, it keeps people from being productive citizens, it keeps people from living their authentic selves and contributing to the world in the way that they can.
So the psychological effects can be really profound and impact on an individual's levels of functioning. So it is important that this is something that we all stand up against, this particular issue, and we all know that we have a role and responsibility to create a safe working environment, but also a safe home environment.
Everyone is vulnerable to hate speech, and we're going to see some form of discrimination at any age. If you're a victim of hate speech, if you're a victim of bias or discrimination, there is no age to be hurt.
So the idea is to really, learn about the other, have the opportunity to interact with them frequently, so you know them as individuals, as human beings, rather than as labels or as groups as such.
Nepal is very vulnerable to climate change. Children experience loss of homes and families because climate change presents itself in different ways. It comes in form of floods, it comes in form of landslides, it comes in form of lightning and strikes, and even wildfires when it's very hot. Then children experience loss of homes. They experience loss of education because of schools being washed away and being flooded. They experience loss of loved ones, including parents, including their own property or belongings like memories, school books, their clothing. They experience hunger because of floods which wash away crops. And we do believe that when children are equipped with awareness, but also given the opportunities to champion some of these efforts at school, at communities, and within the surroundings, then they can become powerful climate actors, even in terms of bringing about change, and ensures that children are not disrupted in any way, but they can continue receiving those services and continue learning despite what is happening, and they can adapt and be able to continue with life despite the effects of climate change.
In 1989, you talked about protecting my rights. You said it was important. You adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But it feels worse now than ever before. this message ever reaches you. We ask you to do one thing. Listen and take action.
In 1957, an agency was created with a vision to harness the power of the atom for the benefit of humankind. It works with partners across the globe to help countries use nuclear science and technology to meet development challenges. Boosting food supplies, improving health, protecting the environment, and contributing to global peace. This agency provides the technology, expertise, and training to make all this possible. Through nuclear science, it helps countries to develop high-yielding crops that can thrive in extreme conditions, breed healthier livestock, and protect fruit and animals from harmful pests. The work of this agency supports the conservation of our oceans and coastlines, protecting the marine resources that ensure the livelihoods of millions of people. It promotes the use of nuclear technology to fight cancer and improve human health. The organization assists countries with their energy planning. If they choose nuclear power, it offers expertise to ensure facilities are run safely and securely. It provides standards and assistance to ensure the safe use of radioactive materials, guidance on the management of the waste generated by the use of nuclear technologies, and helps nations to prepare for and respond to incidents and emergencies. It's an agency that prevents the spread of nuclear weapons by helping to make sure that nuclear materials remain in peaceful uses. It's the global platform for cooperation in nuclear security, advising countries how to guard against nuclear terrorism and prevent the theft and smuggling of radioactive materials. Providing technology and expertise, promoting safety and security, assisting sustainable development. This is Atoms for Peace and Development. This is the IAEA.
Plastic impacts oceans. 18 to 20% of all plastic waste is ending up in the oceans. Plastics has a huge impact on ocean health, on economy. Tourism is impacted. It means that fisher folk living on coastal areas are impacted, and also beach cleanup. Beach cleanup costs a lot. And what are we doing here at the UN Oceans Conference? There is great celebration for the biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions treaty. And now the focus is turning to the plastics treaty. The scale and urgency of the plastic pollution crisis highlights the need for continued, bold, coordinated, and collective action. There is hope that it will conclude. The agreement will conclude in Geneva this year in August.
The Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was adopted by the United Nations in 2007.
the draft resolution A/61/L67 is adopted.
It took more than 20 years of negotiation. It's a specific and the first of its kind within the United Nations that recognize the historical injustices that indigenous people suffered from, that sets norms and principles for redressing those injustices. It also contains very strong rights for indigenous people, notably the right to self-determination, which is, I would say, the core or the pillar of indigenous rights, recognized internationally to indigenous peoples as nations and as peoples to determine their destiny, to decide on what their education system would be, their health system would be, how they want to project themselves in the future. There has been some progress. Implementing an instrument is, first of all, for states to domesticate the instruments. It means you bring that international law into your domestic legal system. Many countries across the globe has done that, but the number is not really enough. Criminalization of indigenous people is really becoming serious. You indigenous people are seen as extremists, as terrorists, as enemy of state. Indigenous people defending their land, sometimes seen as troublemakers. Then you also have indigenous people affected by extractive industry that are done without due regard to international standards and to rights of indigenous peoples. You have contamination of rivers, contamination of soil, contamination of air. It's a serious issue because it affects really indigenous people's livelihoods. You have sexual violence and gender-based violence increasing in many regions, some linked to conflict areas, are linked to all that tension for natural resources and the extractive industries. And you still have some old issues like forced sterilization of indigenous women, for which a number of states have not accepted responsibility. Human rights are under serious attack. I'm calling to states to reinvest in human rights, put resources in human rights both internationally, regionally, and locally.
The scenes or landscape in the battlefields are dramatically changing. If you look at the news from Ukraine or in the Middle East, I mean, you hear very often about UAVs or armed drones. It has basically become a weapon of choice. The most common ones are UAVs, uncrewed aerial vehicles. And they come in different shapes, sizes, and forms. The small ones, very simple ones that you can basically pick up from your local toy shop, to very sophisticated UAVs that are developed and produced for military purposes. And that is a dramatic sort of changes in the way in which the war and conflicts are fought.
The nature of warfare for the major powers who have been investing in weapon systems has been increasingly remote, right? Greater distance from the battlefield, but still with human control over the identification, the selection, and the firing on targets. If those functions are no longer ones that are undertaken by humans but are undertaken by machines, it raises a whole host of questions, not least are the current laws of war fit for purpose because they were written for humans and not for machines.
The development of technologies like autonomous weapon systems will make it very easy for people to go to war. These systems, once activated, have the ability to go and search, select, target an individual. These systems can be able to make decisions about who lives or die without any further human intervention or control. You can end up not being able, number one, to tell who deployed these systems to begin with. Even if you knew where they are coming from, we may end up with a crime. We may end up with a wrongful act that has been done, but with no soul to blame. Where you can say, who did this to me? And someone will say, actually, no one did. It was the machine.
When autonomy means that once you actually switch it on, then the machines actually are fully delegated with the decision-making power to target and trigger the lethal force and use the lethal force, then it gets really in a blurring, a very difficult area of who is accountable, who is responsible.
I think our experience of technology is that it's imperfect and that it makes mistakes, and we're willing to, tolerate that in the civilian world of our daily lives. But when it comes to the battlefield, a mistake can mean life or death, and it's very easy for machines to mistake targets. We're very concerned about autonomous weapon systems targeting people and using sensor technology to do that. The AI is still flawed. And yet we're starting to incorporate it into weapon systems, and to incorporate it now when it's still not functioning properly and when it brings with it the biases of the people who were programming those systems, it could end up with disastrous results for humanity.
Machines making a decision to take human life is just simply morally repugnant, and it should not be allowed. It should be, in fact, banned by international law. That's the United Nations position. So autonomy, especially attached to UAVs, is a really source of concern.
In terms of international humanitarian law, you are only authorized to target and kill people who are directly participating in hostilities or who are members of a certain state armed force. And I would say you can precisely target a wrong target. So the question is, can these systems be able to lawfully identify legitimate targets?
In a conflict area where things are rapidly changing, where it's completely unpredictable, I doubt that a machine would be able to make the decisions needed to spare civilians, and that they could actually really also make a legal analysis of who is a combatant and who is a civilian in a very short time frame.
When it comes to use of force, especially lethal force, the international law framework is based on the human accountability. So you can't hold the machines or the AI or algorithms accountable. We do have the existing international humanitarian law, and those humanitarian law doesn't apply to just specific categories of weapons. Whatever the weapon systems that you're using, the number one rule is to protect civilians, non-combatants. And this is something that we absolutely have to maintain, but also, I would say, strengthen. We need to make sure that it will be fully implemented.
We think that explicit new international rules are needed to tackle autonomous weapon systems and to give the world a home or a framework for dealing with the problems which are going to be raised in the years to come. Currently, there is no international framework to deal with autonomous weapon systems, and one is urgently needed, and not just in the next couple of decades, but the next couple of years.
Left unregulated, uncontrolled, then I'm sure it will become an existential question. We are still at the beginning of the AI use in weapon systems, and that's why the discussions and negotiations really require urgency. Before these things actually become the weapon of choice, fully autonomous weapons, no human oversight, no human accountability, we need to make sure that we prevent that sort of a quite unpredictable impact on human race.
was deployed in UNISFA in April 2023 as a gender officer in Tajale team site. One of my duty is to engage the women on the issues of sexual and gender-based violence and conflict-related sexual violence. My initial meeting with the people was very alarming. I saw children roaming in the streets aimlessly. I knew I had to do something. When I went to Tajale the other time, I saw that the village was empty. Most of the children were not to be found. I asked and they said they were all in Abe attending school. And so that is one of my highlights in UNISFA.
Origins is the beginnings. It means the roots. Talk about people who have been forcibly taken away from the continent. Talking about where I was born, Nigeria, the culture I was raised in. So for me, this piece is drawing from the different symbols and different themes that have to do with the place I was born.
Good Trouble is an act of defiance. The piece behind me is titled Caribbean Olympics. The Haitian Revolution is the theme. By addressing the work through a swimming competition, in this case, Haiti is first, waving his hand in the air, symbolizing liberation and the first island to gain independence.
We're so excited to be here at the United Nations. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and that's what the Stories of Us is all about. We believe that if we're going to make those ideals a reality, then we have to truly know each other, because we are our stories. We are the stories we hear, we are the stories we tell.
This year, we're going into the second decade for people of African descent. We also invited them as part of the Transatlantic Slave Trade and Slavery Outreach Program. It speaks to the origins of enslavement, and then it traces emancipation, those struggles that happened, and then it really lands in this area of asking us to reimagine the world that we want to live in with much more justice and dignity.
For me, having this piece here, the United Nations, in this time, is very important because as a talking drum, I like to drum up the attention that Haiti really deserve and need, especially right now.
Artworks like this help to show the complexities of what makes us human. This is just an amazing thing to have this experience. We walk into this place and see the different sides of what makes us unique and what makes us beautiful, and that's what makes us human.
noticed that all Bahrainis have pearl diving in their blood. Mainly all the families that moved from the Arabian Gulf or from Iran's coast or Iraq's coast and came to Bahrain to live here were divers. So it was the best place to come work as a diver. So a lot of the families here will always have someone in their family that is either a pearl diver or someone who helped in the pearl diving industry. Bahrain has always been the pearl hub in this region, mainly because it's one of the most shallowest areas. It's an island. Most of the people who resided here were working in the pearl diving industries. Most of our traditions will have to do with the pearl diving industry. For instance, the pearl diving singer, the folk of the pearl diving, this has been passed down for generations. We still sing the same songs. It was mainly done to create morale on the boat.
البحرين مشهورة بصناعة جوا البيت، كانوا يستخدمون حق الغوص حسب المنتنس، يعني إذا أنت تصينها أنت عندك 100 سنة.
وجلسات البحارين يتكلمون عن اللؤلؤ، عن الصيد، عن مصطلح البحر كامل.
المهنة هي طلب رزق مثل ما قلت لك البداية، لكن أنا بالنسبة أقول الحمد لله، ولكن هي بعد طبعا رزق وفيها حيوية ونشاط وصحة حق الجسم بعد كمان.
In taking out tourists, I always used to ask people, who are you finding the pearl for? And when the answer was, for my mama, the pearl gets bigger for some reason. I'm one of the people who, without having guidance from my parents or my family to fall in love with pearl diving, I wasn't taught by anyone, because the generation before us were not allowed to dive when they were young, because since the oil was discovered, all the jobs moved to the oil industry. The risk of diving and pearl diving was very high, so it was not recommended or not wanted from the parents that you say, I'm going to go work in the sea. It was one of the no-nos for our parents' generations and probably even like our granddads. There was a gap, a very long gap, maybe from the 50s till probably 2010, 12. Since 2017 in particular, when they created the pearl diving license for the pearl divers, a lot of the ones who signed up were people who don't know anything about pearl diving. Now, 7 years down the line, the majority of people in Bahrain have gone back and got in touch with that aspect, and it wasn't handed down by their parents. It was us wanting to create a new system. Even our diving techniques have changed compared to the old ones. Even the way we sell pearls has changed. So the new system is created by the new generation. A lot of Bahrainis are into the pearl diving. There's more than 1,000 divers now registered and pearl diving on a daily basis to create an income for themselves. A lot of people are worried that the new generations are depleting the beds because they have new technology, for instance, scuba diving, and so that people think that they will be able to collect more oysters and find more pearls. It's actually the opposite. Because of us using the scuba diving, and it refines you on a certain time, you're only allowed 3 dives a day due to decompression sickness and other problems that could occur. Hopefully, if God gives me the health, I will definitely try to go back to pearl diving as a regular basis, as it's very fulfilling.
not see human rights and human rights defenders particularly as allies that underpin the Sustainable Development Goals.
We, traditional people, are part of the front line in the fight against the climate crisis that is shaking the world. In these efforts, we are directly helping achieve the SDGs, but we pay a terrible price for doing so. I was there. There was nothing I could do but hear the shots and smell the burning gunpowder in the air. The solution to most of the problems we face lies in justice in all its forms, but we cannot do it alone. We need strong allies. That's why we are calling on the United Nations.
I want to sincerely thank each of you for the incredible work that you are doing every day to protect human rights and uphold the dignity of people around the world. Keep fighting, please. Keep fighting.
When you take away our right to have access to information, our right to clean drinking water, when we've been contaminated without our consent, these are huge violations we felt were occurring, and that is why we decided to take the fight to the UN level. And we need to always remember that when we stand together united, that we can win.
Human rights defenders are our lifeblood because they work with the people on the edges of society. If no one is to be left behind, as the Sustainable Development Goals say, we need to reach those people and we need to protect those who are reaching them.
En Chile vivimos alrededor de 2 a 3 millones de mapuche. Una característica especial es la lengua. Una lengua viva, una lengua que a pesar de la colonización, la invasión y la homogenización del Estado, ha sabido resistir, ha sabido sobrevivir y reivindicarse con el tiempo.
There's a lot of things that I love about being Chamorro. One of them is the fact that we occupy multiple islands. I think that has allowed our culture to develop in ways where we live very intimately with both the land and the sea.
Долганы — это арктический народ, который проживает на севере Сибири, России. Мы оленеводы, также занимаемся рыболовством, охотой, собирательством. Всего долган около 8 тысяч во всем мире, но говорящих на долганском языке всего около 800, и поэтому я занимаюсь продвижением и поддержанием моего народа и моего языка.
En el norte de Chile se encuentran las grandes mineras de litio, cobre, que están amenazando no solamente la vida y la cultura de los pueblos andinos, de los pueblos de las montañas, sino que también los ecosistemas y la vida. Alrededor de Chile siempre hemos resistido ante el extractivismo y ahora tenemos una nueva amenaza, lo que dicen que es una industria verde que dice mucho respecto a las nuevas tecnologías, a la innovación, al desarrollo, pero ¿desarrollo para quién?
We are a colony and have been one since the 1500s. There are larger powers that put a pressure on us as a community and change the ways that we live among one another.
Будучи малочисленными, мы находимся под угрозой исчезновения как и физическом, так и духовном. Я сама языковая активистка, я работаю с языками народов России. Мы с нашей командой делаем приложение по изучению якутского языка.
El foro permanente es una lucha incansable de los pueblos indígenas porque se respeten sus derechos humanos. Y es que es el espacio en donde se logran los diálogos, donde se reconocen los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. Son espacios importantes en el que se crean y se intentan aplicar los mecanismos de protección y cuidado.
Находясь в таком окружении, мы вдохновляемся и находим мотивацию для наших будущих проектов.
Young people are masters of change, and from them, real, great, transformative change happens.
Estamos aquí en una situación crítica y solamente nosotros podemos hacer el cambio. Para eso tenemos que estar unidos. Para eso también tenemos que seguir trabajando, dialogando y no seguir en una situación de alta vulnerabilidad.
في الشرق ده وفي الجزيرة هجموا عليه وشالوا الناس الفقراء شالوا هدومهم من الدواليب والله لبسوه.
Over the past year, we have seen 3 waves of displacement of IDPs who have moved from Algeria and Sennar State, increasing the number of people, I think, threefold in Eastern Sudan alone.
الأمة اللي انتم شايفينها قدامكم دي كلها جاية على الأقدام الناس الماشيين 3 يوم والماشيين أسبوع واللي توفوا في الشارع من كثرة المعاناة والتعب والعطش. أنا محمول على أكتاف أولادي 40 ساعة وبهذه العجلة.
Thousands of people that have been displaced from Al Jazeera have come into Gedaref, have come into Kassala, and they are quite in some deplorable and vulnerable states.
We've been pushing for months to get to these communities. We've got convoys coming from Port Sudan going to Kadugli, to Dilling, also other convoys trying to reach North Darfur. These convoys have to reach their final destination. We have to get to these populations. We're asking everybody involved along those roads to give us free passage so that we can assist these populations.
I really need at the present moment a very strong mobilization of the youth movement, because we are really in a very dangerous situation.
Meeting the Secretary General today is such an incredible honor. Having the Secretary General acknowledge our shared but unique and localized struggles, it meant a lot to me.
Depuis mon jeune âge, je rêvais quand est-ce que je pourrais un jour avoir l'occasion de discuter avec les leaders du monde. Et aujourd'hui, je serai en face du tout-puissant secrétaire général